go around the room, and each table is going to present one of their scenarios. But the first thing I wanted to do is because these two tables had similar discussions about something that I think we all need to talk about. And it had to do with the fact that salary is tied to scoring. And you know your people, and they could be really nice people. They're maybe not performing as well as you'd like, but I saw somebody wrote like single mom, and you know their stories, you know their struggles. So let's have a discussion about what do you do? Because that part of you that tugs at your heartstrings about, how this person is trying to provide for their family or whatever. How do you deal with that? What do you do? And I know what many people said is they would go if in doubt 2 or 3, they'd go 3 just so that they didn't have to make that decision of not giving them any kind of pay increase. Let's have a discussion about that. Why don't we start with the tables over here who actually brought this up?
Well, I guess my view is if they're meeting expectations and they're at 3, and then they don't get anything, then it's like,
Well, so a 3 would get something, right?
Initially 3.5 was required to get it, and then they backed out at 3, I think.
Yeah, so I think, as far as I know, 3 would get something, but 2 would not.
that makes it feel better. They're meeting such expectations.
Yeah.
Is that just the 3 overall, or one?
Overall.
On that
Overall.
expectation. Oh, okay.
You would expect that anyone, in your scoring, that anyone would have some 2s in some areas, some 5s in another, some 4s in another, right? And so it would be the overall score.
Now, is that merit increase or just a cost? I mean, just a
Really do better.
Merit, yeah.
Also, the new system now will at 3 you can get.
Yes, a
That
3.
was last year too. Oh, was it?
Yeah, not 3.5, 3. Obviously, someone getting a 3 wouldn't get as much as somebody getting a 4, right?
Right.
Any other thoughts about that issue?
How many times have you discussed it?
It's true. Many times people do avoid those discussions. And if they know that their performance is tied to potential pay increase, they tend to be a little more motivated to try to improve whatever it is they're struggling with. But so many people avoid those conversations, from my experience, and they don't hold the people accountable, and yet they get frustrated with the fact that. Another thing that I see a lot is they don't discuss an expectation. For example, let's go back to the on-time thing. If you haven't had that discussion of I expect you to be on time, your role is one that requires you to be here at 8 o'clock or whatever time. Because of your role, we can't flex your time. We need you to be here at 8 o'clock. And if that doesn't change, then unfortunately I'm going to need to write you up. Sometimes people don't have those discussions. They just expect. I know that I've seen, for example, people interview people, and they said, well, the person came to the interview and they were dressed so nicely, and now they're dressed like, like they're going to a rock concert or something. They're really not dressed appropriately for the workplace. And I always say, first thing I ask, have you talked to them about it? No. Well, what do you expect from them? It's not their fault that they, that they don't realize. Honestly, it's not their fault. You have to have the discussion. Just because you know better doesn't mean that somebody you've hired knows better. You need to have the discussion. You don't need to wait weeks or months into their term of employment to have that discussion. It needs to be first occurrence, whatever the issue is.
I think one other thing here is because our salaries, are public and people can see them. So if we have somebody in our department that is already making more than the other employees, and maybe they're at the same position, and then but they're like a 4 or 5 employees, so they get an even higher raise than maybe the other employees at 3, and then they can see the other employees will go on and look and see that, and so that's been like a morale issue. Not that the other person doesn't deserve it, but I guess that could just come into your mind when you're giving the increases.
Yeah. Do you want to talk at all about salary issue? Not really.
Yes, I would love to.
Yeah, I know that HR is wrestling also with the idea that there are people who have inflated salaries who, and you all know this, right? And so when it comes to a sustainability standpoint of the corporation, you really need to think about how much of a pay increase should somebody get. Are people in positions right now where they're getting salaries that are way, you can't really fix that at this point. You certainly want to, going forward, make some adjustments.
Well, and
But
it's
could
hard.
it be if they switch from another department or
It could be
some
a lot.
other factor?
That's
Oh yeah,
true.
there's all sorts of things, and it's hard because I think, you know, when someone's doing a good job, you want to give them a raise, but at the same, you have to balance that with what's the job that they're doing work. And so just because I'm doing a really great job answering the phone at the front desk doesn't mean I should be getting $80,000 a year for that. You know, so that's something that we kind of have to look at is what is the job that the person's doing worth, and it's great that they're doing a great job, but you know, it doesn't mean that they're going to get a 6% increase every year because, you know, 10 years ago they were making what anybody else would make in that kind of position. So that's hard too. You know, that's something that we're trying to figure out also.
We used to reward, in those instances, with bonus.
Mhm.
That's gone. Yeah.
Is it gone for good? Yes?
For
For
now.
now. For now. Nothing is ever permanent. You just never know, right? What's that? What was that?
I just said when it goes into statute.
Wait. Are you telling me statute doesn't change? Are you saying statute doesn't change?
It wouldn't be because I was the one pushing it.
Yeah, unfortunately things change all the time. New leadership comes in, everything changes, right? So it's been that way, you know, for years. Whenever the legislative process is tied to, or boards or anything else has a role in making decisions, things change. So, all right. Well, that being said, let's go ahead and go around the room, and each table will share a scenario, and then we'll discuss the scenario. So let's begin with this table right here. What's your scenario? And try to, and if you don't mind, come right over here because we're recording. Just, no, really, because we're recording, so the people who aren't in attendance, yeah.
This is what it looks like from up here.
Okay, have a seat.
Oh, should I stand?
No, whatever. Okay, so listen up.
This is a fictional character that we came up with. His name is Bob. Bob is a likable and friendly person. Bob works hard, but his quality of his work is actually less than average. Bob does meet the quantity of his expectations, and Bob is technically timely, but does take advantage of any opportunity to legally be out.
Oh.
So, right.
And
So
what's the performance measure we're looking at? Is this universal expectation, or what is it?
I did not think about.
Okay.
Didn't think about specifically.
So
which,
generally
I was just
speaking-
making the scenario, and we can
Okay.
talk about it.
So what's that? What did you? What? Well, we'll ask other people. What do you think about this scenario? How? What kind of number is floating into your head? How many of you think 5? Raise your hand. 4,
He's very
3.
late.
Some 3s. We got quite a few 3s. Raise your hand again for 3.
Fine.
Interesting. 2. 1. So we have a combination of 2s and 3s, primarily 2s. What did you say?
I mean, I was thinking like between 2 and 3. When we were talking about categories, I
Yeah.
would say, oh, give him a 3 in this category because he's met everything.
Right.
He's doing his job. Give him a 2 in this one because the quality of his work isn't up there. But in the the quantity of his work and his timeliness, he is on time. So.
Yeah, so that's why ideally, if you have a scenario tied to a performance expectation, then it's a little easier. So, but I agree. If you have a big scenario and it encompasses several different performance expectations, it would be this and that. Overall, to me, he's a 2. I'd give Bob a 2. So,
Good job, Nick.
all right. Let's go over to this table. Who is going to read the scenario? Can you come on up and for the sake of recording? For the sake of recording here.
Well, this is a fictional character as well.
You're not required to sit. By the
Okay. Dude, what's with the Snickers though?
way. Maybe
Um,
somebody will earn it.
This was I was having to do an evaluation on an individual that worked for me that was an extremely high producer, great employee, but he dictated all of his reports. And so he was constantly behind. We were always having to stay on him to get his reports in. But his quality of his reports were better than anybody else. So he was good at what he did. He was just slow in getting his stuff in, but received a lot of praise from prosecutors and got a lot of kudo letters, always being submitted on his behalf. But then coupled with all of that is he had a ton of complaints for hygiene. So he smelled. And so people were constantly complaining they didn't want to work with him, they didn't want to have to get in a car with him. So evaluating was extremely hard because he was one of those people you didn't want to lose because of his work quality and the fact that he had, every prosecutor, had we done anything with him, would have been breathing down our neck. So, tried to work with him and do what we could, but that was the scenario we had.
Wow. Okay, many different components in there. So he submitted his reports not in a timely manner, but with quality, right?
Worked more cases than anybody else.
So despite not having timely reports, he worked more cases.
Yep.
And
Is that tied to the fact?
Hmm?
Is that tied to it that he had more?
yeah, I'm wondering that too. If he had a larger caseload.
Most of it had to do with his inability to use a computer and had to dictate everything.
Who would he dictate to? Someone had to type it up.
Recorder. We had a secretary that took all of his
They
stuff.
didn't have Siri though.
I was thinking the same thing. Well, for 15 years, I've dictated to my computer and it'll actually type it. So.
But also, I was promoted in 1998, so this was 1998 is what. So we're talking about it.
They
Different
still
time.
wanna vote back then.
But people did stink back then, so I will say that was.
So did anyone discuss his hygiene issues? Did
I
the
did.
supervisor discuss?
I did.
Okay. And that must have been a really fun conversation.
Yeah, wanted to know who said he stunk. So I had to tell him, I'm telling you, you stink right now.
Okay.
That was where it went. I mean, it was that bad.
And what did he say about it?
He didn't agree with me, so we got into an argument about it. So, yeah, it's a funky conversation.
Yeah. So how many of you would score, what's his name?
I don't want to say his
Nameless
name.
Bob. Let's call it Bob number 2. How many of you would score him as a 5? All right. Stinky. How about a 4?
I would score him like a 4 or 5,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
production
'cause he's good.
and things, but then probably maybe the universal expectation would be lower. So
Is hygiene part of the universal expectation?
I think that's part of being courteous to your coworker.
Okay. All right. Good point. How many of you would score him a 3? A 2? Ooh. Or a 1? So it sounds to me like he was achieving expectations. He wasn't mentoring, he wasn't teaching, he wasn't going above and beyond, right? He was
No,
just really
no.
good at what he did.
Oh, no, he did all of that as well.
Oh, okay. I didn't get the part about
Well,
mentoring.
no, he was, well, I don't want to identify the guy.
Got a lot of praise.
So
Yeah,
what
he
number,
did a lot of instruction in the area that he had expertise in.
What number did you give him?
Well, it was so different back then. It wasn't, the numbering system.
They were
Yeah.
still 1 to 5
This is
then.
fictional Stinky Bob.
No, this was
Give him
actually.
a number
No,
now.
it wasn't 1 to 5.
Give him a number now.
It was 10 questions. 10 things we gave him. But
What would you give him now?
right now, I would probably, knowing him because of everything, 3.5.
Okay, if you had to pick a 3 or a 4, what would you give him?
That's where I would struggle with it because of if it got down to whether he was going to get compensated over the 3 or the 4, and I think that's where everybody's at now. You know, it comes into the X factor, and it's the thing of evaluating somebody that you can't explain what it is. You only know it when you see it. And this guy had that. He had these other factors that played in, but you know, I would probably have rated him a 4 given the scenario we have right now.
Well, and you would have multiple expectations that you're grading on,
Yeah.
so the composite could be a fraction.
Yeah, it could be,
You know,
the
so
composite.
you could have ended up to 3.5. You
True.
probably would have been lower on some of those interpersonal kind of.
But at the time, it was 10 questions, and it was a checkbox. So it wasn't, you know, a rating like we have now.
Oh, you miss those days, don't you?
Okay, we had a question or comment back here?
I guess I was thinking as a supervisor in these scenarios where I saw that he had quality reports, but maybe he wasn't technically capable. I would think that would be an opportunity for me to seek out training to help bring them to the technological era,
Yeah.
because they could be time wasting these reports, kind of thing.
But remember, it's 1998 and not 2008.
Right, but I said
So
it,
back
if
then,
it's, yeah,
it
if
was
it's
taken.
current
We're looking at his
situation,
day.
I would still,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
still want to try to, you know, not only, reward him for his good, you know, for all the things he is doing good, I would also want to try to support his skill set by plugging in training as part of the evaluation process.
Yeah, I agree. Personally, based on what you've said, I wouldn't give him more than a 3.
Wow.
I wouldn't. Trey gave him a 2. I mean, I really wouldn't. I think about he was technologically challenged and didn't complete his reports on time.
Well,
And here's the thing.
not technological. It was more. I said computer. It was a typewriter.
Okay.
So that was the, you know, reports were typed.
But also, to me, when you said that he argued with you, when you talked to him about the opportunity for improvement, that to me is a red flag. When somebody is not receptive to feedback, I know it's hard, especially the personal hygiene
I was about to
issue.
say, I don't know how many times you've had to tell somebody they stink, but it's a.
I never said you
it-
stink, but I have had that conversation.
It's a personal affront, and it's one of those that that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Maybe you couldn't smell it. That's why he disagreed.
It's true.
It depends on your work.
Regardless of what feedback you gave him, the fact that he didn't accept it and then argued, like started an argument with you, to me, that's
Well,
a
he
red
didn't
flag.
feel like he stunk.
All right, let's give him a round of applause. Hey, he didn't earn that candy bar. Just kidding. Just kidding. Who at this table would like to go?
Gabrielle, I think we had a question.
Oh, you have a question? Yes, please.
Oh, I was just gonna say, how did you handle your situation?
Well, you're very careful with words, right? So I think you always, with any kind of feedback that you know is going to be challenging to receive from the other person, you always start on a positive note. Sandwich, compliment sandwich, right? Always starting in on a positive note. And then it was very delicately saying, however, one thing that could use improvement is personal hygiene. Being very careful not to say there's an odor, there's, you know, and he did. And in the case of the person I talked to, and he was having some struggles at home that he then shared with me, and we had a gym in the building. This was a state agency. We had a gym in the building, and I suggested, you know, would you consider maybe coming to work early and cleaning up here? And he did, and he changed his behavior. And he thanked me for talking to him, although it was hard. It was really hard. He at first got defensive, but then he was like, you know, you're right, and here's why. And I felt badly for him, but at the same time, I told him, you know, we're interacting. We weren't just interacting with people in the office, but people outside of the office, and it was really important for him to have good personal hygiene. So he did. He changed. He turned it around, and he started coming early, and you know, cleaning up in the gym. So yeah, he was living in his car. If that's any indication for why he was starting. Yeah, and so it breaks your heart, and you learn. You learn things like he told me he had gone through a divorce, and he was struggling with homelessness, and you know, and so I felt badly for him, and I certainly had empathy for him, but then it's like, what can we do to help fix the problem? And I also referred him to EAP.
We've had that happen a couple of times in my career, and it's good to talk about it because then you can get them hooked up with someone. And we've had people, get to EAP and be able to get housing, and because they are living in their cars, that happens. That really happens.
It really does.
That uncommon, and so, and it was the same thing. They stunk because they were living in their car, they didn't have access, and so just have that conversation is really hard to have, but it can open the door to help them. So.
In the case of the person I'm talking about, this was in a law enforcement agency, and we had locked doors until the person was supposed to report for duty. So I had to make some modifications to get permission for him to have access to the building 30 minutes earlier, and it wasn't a problem. I just had to go through some hoops to do that. So, but it all ended up working out, and he ended up getting back on his feet. EAP helped him a lot, get access to resources. I would have never known, unless we had that conversation. So it is important to have that conversation. Just be careful with your words. Sure. All right. So we have the next table. Yes. You don't have to sit there. You can stand. It's
All right.
recording right here.
All right. Mark is an analyst in a grant reporting unit, and he has good research and analytical skills, but is not well organized. He is able to meet expected deadlines, but not without much intervention from his supervisor. His disorganization is also a factor in answering questions related to the programs under his purview, and that sometimes those questions aren't answered as quickly as needed. Mark is able to complete, or again, Mark is not able to complete those requests in a timely manner.
All right. So he's not a great performer.
No,
Right.
not to the level that he could be.
And he's not timely.
Not timely,
Okay.
and it's pretty much related to his disorganized.
All right. So how many of you would score him a 5? A 4? A 3? 2? 1? All right. Talk to us about your 1.
It doesn't sound like he can do anything on time or even up to level.
Well, he can, but not without a lot of prodding from, he's got skills, but he just needs a lot of intervention.
So you have Mark on a performance improvement plan, do you?
I did, actually. This happened to be a case that we had, and I was telling our group, we actually had to come up with a color-coded foldering system just for him, which, again, it didn't work for Mark. It worked fine for everybody else in the unit, but it didn't work for Mark, and it was just one of those things. I think they'd been, and a lot of these things you bring even up from your childhood. It's just the way maybe you're brought up, or the way you do things at home. They come to work with you. There's this separation from work and home, and it never seems. It's just hard to get that into their mind. It's just the way we do things here versus at your home. So yeah, we tried to implement it. It didn't work, and so again, he was a good analyst and a good. He had great research skills, but he just could never get past that point of making him one of the best in the unit. He was always just, slightly below average. Because I wish I had those skills that he had to do things in another person that was organized. That would have made a great player.
Did you say you did an improvement?
That's what I was just going to ask. You put him on a plan,
Yeah,
and how
we-
did that go?
Not. He pretty much stayed the same. We got a little bit better with some of the filing, some of the things that needed to get done, but it was always a problem when it came down to not so much is that we got closer and closer to the deadline part of it, but it was just these things, these calls you get from grantees, things like that, where they need answers within the next hour or two, and he was always fumbling around, looking through file cabinets, going through this, looking, on the computer for the files and the worksheets, and it was always that where I had to get involved and, just in the search, so to speak.
So what was the outcome? If he didn't do well on his performance improvement plan, was he terminated?
No, he was not terminated. He was a below average employee. Could have been better, but he was not terminated.
He got better on the improvement plan a little bit.
Yeah,
Just a little
but
bit,
again,
okay.
it was just one of those. He could have been one of the best, and he, had the organizational skills. And again, like I said, I would have liked to have the skills that he had in research and analytics, and put that into somebody that was organized.
That's my experience with improvement plans is anybody can improve for 60 or 90 days. They try really hard, they get it done. So usually what that tells me is it's a willingness issue. It's not a performance issue because he can do it. He tried really hard for 60 days and he got it done. And that's what happens with most people. So then when you see that, you get through that, and you're like, wait a second, he did better, so he can do it. So, or he improves enough to do better, and so then you're looking at, okay, well, really, is this a performance issue, or is this something we should be handling like disciplinary wise? So.
2 questions, one here and one there. Yeah.
Are there a certain set of issues and another set of issues that maybe like performance plans will work on, and then there's some issues where it's not going to work?
Yes, it works on someone who needs more training. That's what it's really great for, because you're doing like a 60 to 90 days intensive. We're meeting once a week. We're talking about what you did. We're talking about what the goals were. Here's what went good. Here's what went wrong. So people who just need a little bit more training, they work great for. Everyone else, it pretty much bombs because they're going to get better. I promise they're going to get better because anyone can do it for 60 or 90 days. And then once it's over, they'll go and it goes and it nose bomb again.
Say that again.
So it's really for people who need more training. That's where it works great. So the way I separate it in my mind is a performance problem is like a training issue. A willingness issue is everything else, disciplinary. So
What if you've got like a personality?
That's discipline.
And that's not something, you have
Yeah.
to see,
So if you're-
situations where you know there's no hope.
Right.
Yeah.
We're still going to try. We would still try. We would go through the steps. But, if you're a jerk, you can choose not to be a jerk. That's a choice that you're making. So it's being held accountable, but that is not okay with us. So you could be a jerk at home. You can do whatever you want. But here, we're expecting you to be a team player. And
So with a disciplinary issue, you write them up and you put them on a performance improvement?
you can if we think that.
But
that's
you don't
a good
really
way
think
to
it's
go.
a good way to go.
Generally
So just
not.
write them up. Okay, good.
That's my
It's good things are mine because I was just going to ask how often do performance plans will that actually work? Is it very minimal or
Very minimal.
are you just delaying the inevitable?
Well, Jessica, let's clarify. When it's performance related,
Right.
they're good.
Yes. Oh, yes.
But when it's not
truly
performance related, then a performance improvement plan is not going to work. So,
Correct.
right.
Right.
So a disciplinary issue or anything like that is not going to really help.
And a lot of our job expectations are tied to stuff that maybe are more behavior based or more effort based. And so those are the things that
Good discussion. Thank you very much for that one. That was good. Give 'em a round of applause. Yeah. Should we go to the stable? All right. Come on, give it to us.
Okay, so here. All right, so you have an employee, excellent employee, and so at the beginning of the performance period, you sit down, you have plan out the expectations, and you say, all right, I want you to go solve world hunger. That is your job, and I want you to do it. And so at the end of the performance period, they come back and they actually solve world hunger. All right, so excellent employee, they did what you told them to do. So what would you rate that person?
Who would score the person knowing that that was the performance expectation? Who would score them a 5? Raise your hand. Good amount of 5s. 4. 3. 2. 1. Why would you score 5?
I was kidding when I first said
Okay.
5 because he.
Those of you who scored 5, why would you score a 5?
When we initially talked
Right.
Because of the complexity of the task that was given.
However,
We got into a discussion about, well, the task was the task. So if
Right.
the task was to solve world hunger, then technically you met the task. You didn't exceed it, you met it.
right.
So it just got us into a tangent of why the details of the expectation was important.
And so when they shared that with me, what did I say right away? I said 3.
3, yeah.
I said 3. And the reason is they achieved expectations. They didn't go above and beyond. What did you say? Somebody said if they solve world hunger and poverty, then maybe they're a 4. If they mentored other people and taught them also, brought them forward in the effort, then maybe they're a 5. But really, no matter how big the performance expectation, if they achieve that expectation, they're a 3.
It goes back though to it's kind of another day's discussion about expectations.
Yes.
And some supervisors' expectations of certain employees even in the same unit may be different than others, and then it skews the other side, not just reading what your expectations are.
Could not agree more. We can't change the expectations and the ratings at the same time. It'd just be too much. But definitely the next step in October is to really take a deep look at those expectations.
The reason I thought about it because when you were talking about 5,
Mhm.
and so I started thinking about what would go into a 5, and then so that kind of ties to the expectation. So the issue is, do you set low expectations so people can achieve, or
Ooh.
I
Yeah,
mean,
the answer is no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
So if they're capable of achieving, solving world hunger,
Yeah.
then it's a good expectation.
and then
It's
that
a
leads
3.
you to a 3.
As a supervisor, I'm gonna nominate them for the
Nobel Peace Prize.
There you
Nobel
go.
Prize, then-
Yeah, but they don't get a raise.
But they get $1 million prize. because
They get a
know
little
about-
raise. They're 3, they get a little raise.
They get the minimum.
I mean, hopefully they scored well on the other components too.
But you shouldn't give an expectation just based on the he or she or the they.
Exactly.
It should be based on the position.
Right, and that's what he was saying
Yeah.
too, was, often we have expectations that are different for different people. On our teams even, we know that one person is stellar and we're gonna give them higher expectations, which is not always a good thing. And so when they meet that expectation, they're just a 3, and you've given someone else, maybe in a similar position, lower expectations, and they achieve those, and they're a 3, and so they seemingly have the same level of performance, but in actuality, one had a higher expectation. So we'll talk about expectations next time, because really, performance measures are really the key to bringing things full circle. You got to go back to the performance measures, and they need to be measurable and observable. And I'm sure there are probably many that are not currently. That would be my guess. I haven't looked at your performance evaluations, but based on my experience with lots of organizations, performance measures in and of themselves are a challenge. And so that will be the next step, is revising this.
Well, they're a challenge for the corporation, because the corporation as a whole has performance measures set upon it by DEO. So we have a set of performance measures that we met last year and we're currently meeting now. So when you say that the corporation overall, we all exceeded or not exceeded what we met, well, we met the measures that the corporation had set, but we didn't set them an outside entity.
Right.
So I mean, I think it all does tie together between employee and corporate.
Agreed. All right, very good. Let's go to this table. How are you?
I'm good.
We know each other from a past life.
Yes, yes.
She's awesome.
So, let's call my employee Bill.
Oh, we changed from Bob to Bill.
I'm just kidding. Okay, so in our scenario, this person gets along well with everybody and can answer people's questions when they come to this person. And they perform their tasks adequately. I would say that they meet expectations. And they know their job and their job duties. but when working on their own, they lack confidence and ask questions on a constant basis, even though they know the answer. The other part of this is this person then comes in late and is out sick often. So, what do you guys think?
Okay, so what was the this is okay. So the first part, performance related.
Performance related. They meet their expectations, but they just lack confidence in making those decisions on their own. Yet if David goes up to Bill and asks a question, Bill can answer it, and he's right.
So they require additional supervision
Yes.
in order to get anything done.
Yes.
And then the second part of it
The second part of it is that they come in late and they're out sick often.
Okay. Who thinks this person is a 5, 4, 3? Spattering of 3s. 2, 1. So it looks like more 2s than 3s. So what would you rate them?
We rated them a 2, I think, overall, but we kind of had some discussion between a 2 and 3 because we're the people that said single mom. And so that kind of
but I
played into
hate
it,
to
but
say this,
you're
you
right.
can't. You know what? Just because one person in the room is not a single mom,
Right.
maybe they're just, and somebody else
Right.
is. The thing
Right.
is, you can't let your empathy for the person's situation cloud the ratings. You just can't. It's not fair to the other people.
Right.
And so it's hard, but it's something that you have to pay attention to. I would give them a 2 personally, because part of the performance criteria include that when you have to have more supervision for somebody, that they're not achieving expectations. So, and then as far as the second part of it, they sound like a 1.
Yeah.
For some people just milk the system and they use all their leave time and they. Now, if there was a reason, I'd have to have that discussion. If there was a reason, then I might take that into account, right? Because truly, some people have chronic health issues, and you do need to take that into account. Or if they are a single mom, they might have a sick child that they need to take care of. Or if they're just an employee, maybe they have a parent or a spouse that they're caregiving for. And I think you need to take those kind of things into account, too. I mean, the combination of humanity and then also accountability, because some people do just milk the system. I've seen them milk the system. I've had employees before that they think that their sick leave is something that they earn and should be used immediately for Fridays off, and so okay, that was good. Thank you.
Well, let me ask this too, because one of the things that was brought up at our table was if you gave them a 2, would it motivate them to improve? And in this particular scenario, I think it would. So.
And ideally, you have those conversations throughout the year before you get to the performance evaluation process, and you let them know, look, performance here is related directly to merit-based increases. And if you're, stay on the same path, I hate to say it, but you're not going to have earned a raise. And so that normally makes them think about, okay, maybe I shouldn't take Friday off again, or so. Any other thoughts about this scenario? Yes.
I feel like for the employee who you heard that they know the answer, a lot of it is building up their confidence. And okay, it's a complex subject that you guys deal with, and I think that we tend to question ourselves when it comes to external questions from people who are not, at Florida Housing, but we tend to be more comfortable with our colleagues in answering questions because there's that inner confidence. I think you just need to work to help build that confidence that they can answer the external questions without second guessing and then without putting extra work.
Right.
I think that's an excellent point. And I say that the root of all evil in the workplace and quite frankly the world is insecurity and fear. And so insecurity is something that a lot of people deal with, and they carry it with them. They carry it from their personal lives to their workplaces, and they struggle. And certainly finding ways to build confidence in the person would help. And then, yeah.
But I think that the part where the person asks a lot of questions, even redundantly, maybe in addition to stuff that they might already know, it's kind of hard to bring them from a 3 to a 2 on that, because unless they're failing some measure that was in their expectations, I mean, if I were that person and you tell me, oh, you're down to a 2 because you asked a lot of questions, I'm like, I'm being dinged because I'm asking for help.
So asking questions is a good thing, right? Asking questions is a good thing, but taking too much of a supervisor's time for things that you could solve yourself is actually part of the performance expectations. Is that the more that if you're a 3, that means that an adequate amount of supervision is required.
And another good tip that I've used before is I put it back on and what would you do? So it makes them think and makes them do their job.
Right. And I think that what you said is so key. So a lot of times supervisors are so good at what they do. And people come to them and they say, I have a question, how would you do this? And the supervisor just honestly to get back to work and everything else, they know the answer, they give it to them, they spoon feed them the answer. And all that does is encourage people to not critically think for themselves and to be dependent on the supervisor. And so asking questions like, how would you solve this? Or why don't you think about it and come back to me with 3 possible solutions and then tell me which one would be best. Even though it takes more time, overall what it does is it gets the person thinking. And then they come back and they go, well, so I thought about it and here are the 3 things, but the one that I would choose is this and here's why. And then hopefully they put enough thought into it. You can say, that's excellent, that is so good. That's the kind of thing I want you to do. And then they start to think more independently for themselves, frees up the supervisor's time, and your team as a whole ends up performing a lot better. So, great point. Question. Wait, you're not off the hook yet. I'm out of here.
That's right. I think where a lot of just being an outsider looking in, not necessarily here either, because I don't know, but I think a lot of companies fail at professional development training. It sounds like in all of these scenarios, it can be so simply, solved by just getting in professional development training. So that may be another, thing that person could benefit from.
All right, give her a round of applause. Let's see, last but not least.
So I thought this would be a little bit different until Chris came up. Welcome to the 6th floor, by the way. So we tried to think of something a little bit different. So what you have, this is fictional, but you've got a new employee you've hired into the organization for a manager's level position. But the nature of the position is such that it's very difficult to find someone with all the skills that you need. So you've selected somebody, a lot of experience, a lot of abilities, a lot of the skills required, but they really need to know the core business of the organization. That's just going to take time to learn. So you bring them in and you develop their expectations, but at the same time you know that it's going to take them 2 to 3 years with your experience in that position to be successful and to be comfortable in the position. So how do you grade them out the first and second year? They ask all the right questions, they do all the right things, they put the effort forth, they're a good team player, they do whatever's asked of them, but because it just takes some time to learn the core businesses of the organization, it's going to be a couple, 3 years before they're a very high performer. And there are internal pressures not to set the expectations on this position too low because it is a management level position.
Is it Bob or Bill?
No, it's actually Stu. But I wanted to leave his name out of it.
How many of you would rate? Is there any more information you have for us?
Unless anybody has a question to clarify anything.
Any questions before we go to ratings?
I think to rate that, you would have to.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example?
You would have to know what?
Well, I was going to say this is more of a discussion about expectations than rating.
Can you give us an example of an expectation that Stu might have had?
It would be something related to a core business function of the organization that he wasn't familiar with. It is just take time to learn it. I'm trying to come up with something more specific, but okay, I'll relate it here.
Okay.
With my position in QA. Knew nothing about affordable housing programs and everything when I came in. Just took time. So that's the kind of scenario that you have. Learning about statutes and rules. It's very similar to that situation. It's just going to take some time.
So the person is performing okay considering
No,
they're new.
the person's doing everything they can do to be the best employee they can be.
Okay.
They're asking the right questions. They're enthusiastic. Yet the work that they're turning in needs work because of their unfamiliarity with the core business process.
Okay.
The core businesses.
Question. Oh, you're ready. Who would rate the person a 5? A 4? Got a couple 4s. Interesting. A 3. A 2. Is this a scratch?
So you're saying 3 because
So
you
3.
believe that they're meeting your expectation of that position?
I think
Coming
you
in?
have to.
Isn't perfection. It's not
It-
free.
Right.
Yes.
Their
Right.
expectation is year 1 expectation.
Yes.
And then year 2 expectation is going to be a little bit higher.
Right.
It's going to be a little hard, right?
Yes.
They should be able to get there.
Completely agree. You can't expect someone to hit the ground running and know and absorb
Yep.
like all the information about the corporation and everything, and things that they may not be familiar with. And so I think you do need to think about year 1 expectations are going to be quite different than year 2 and year 3. Maybe by year 3 you've ramped them up to where you need them to be, but until then they're meeting expectations even if they're struggling a little bit. I think.
I think that what he said was that there was maybe some kind of pressure to
Oh, yeah.
keep the expectations high. So I think
Well, because you got a mid-manager level position,
Right.
obviously you don't want to set the expectations too low because then that sets a bad
Right.
message
So I
and
think
standard.
what you could do is if you didn't have complete control of that, I would be very descriptive in the comments of that says, Stu is asking all the right questions, Stu's working very diligently, he's done all the research he needs to do, he's adding to his knowledge every day as he makes his way through the first year of his job.
Yes.
Something like that. And so that way it's documented that, yeah, he's not all the way up to par yet, but he's we're making it. He's doing what he needs to do.
Yeah, I like that. It's good. I think the comments are something that people don't take the time as much as they should to write explanations as for why they're rating, and it really is helpful. Any other questions about Stu? Thoughts?
It's not really Stu.
Okay. All right, give him a round of applause. Did I miss anyone? What about anyone who didn't get a chance to share a scenario? You just want to get out of here, don't you? Yeah. Okay. So we'll wrap up then. So, yes.
So it's really hard to get full, let alone 5.
Mhm.
Is that the conclusion? That
Yeah, I mean, people need to go above and beyond to get a 4 or 5. If they're just meeting expectations, they're achieving what they were supposed to achieve, they should be a 3. It's hard to think that, but if they're achieving, then they're a 3. They have to do more.
There are some positions that you can't go above.
You can go above and beyond in any position. You can take initiative. You can get along really well with other people. You can have a super strong work ethic. You can always go be a little better. My first job was Burger King, okay? Vegetarian flipping Whoppers. I was the best Whopper maker you would ever meet. And what I'm saying is no matter what the job is, you can always do a really, really good job at it. I wasn't just meeting expectations. I was the fastest Whopper maker. They were accurate. I was great with customer service. No matter what job it is, you can go above and beyond. And a lot of it has to do with the interactions you have with other people. So often in organizations, they focus on external customer service when in reality, internal is what matters most. The way that people get along with each other is huge. And it certainly plays a big role in your core values and in the universal expectation. So even if somebody has kind of a mundane job, they could maybe take initiative of saying, if we change this process a little bit, it might end up saving us about 5 minutes, to 10 minutes per report. And we're producing a lot of reports, whatever. You think about efficiency, making improvements in your job, whatever it is. There are ways to do that. even mechanical, seemingly mundane tasks can be improved. Other questions or thoughts? A great discussion. I really appreciate everybody contributing, and if you have more questions, now would be a good time to bring those up. A couple of other things that were added, a few questions were added on the self-evaluation component. What are skills that I would like to improve? What new goals, responsibilities, or added challenges have I taken on since my last performance evaluation? And what components of my job would I like to change or eliminate, and why? Okay, and then there were a couple of changes. It used to say, in what ways can my supervisor help me do my job better? And we kind of felt like that was putting too much pressure on the supervisor, so instead, in what ways can my supervisor better support me or help me improve performance? Changed from list your achievements, accomplishments, and responsibilities, which would just be a essay, to what are my most significant accomplishments and contributions since my last performance evaluation. Now, when we looked at what the benchmark data show, this is kind of what we're thinking. This is not a set in stone kind of thing. It's just a suggestion of this should be about where your performance criteria should fall. 5 to 10% should be in the exemplary performance of expectation of 5, 20 to 30% and exceeds expectation of 4, 40 to 6% and achieves expectation of 3, 5 to 15% in needs improvement of 2, and then 0 to 5% fails to meet expectation of 1. There is a lot of different research out there, and people have different ideas, but kind of summarizing what was found, this is the distribution. Now, some people have forced distributions, and we don't believe in that. This is just a guideline to say, hopefully not 90% are in exemplary performance of expectation, for example. Okay? Yeah, they have, some have curves, forced curve. That is not recommended. That's terrible. Like to force people, because you really could have a great team. You could have just an exceptional team. You have 4 people, and they're all excellent people. And then to kind of force them into a 3 or whatever.
There's got to be a bad guy.
Yeah, somebody's got to be. That's awful. Yeah. So we just kind of offer this up as a, just to kind of think about, okay, when for each performance criterion, that this would be the
And I could see how there could very well be 0 for ones, because by the time you get to November, like, gee, I hope we don't have a whole lot of ones.
I would hope so too.
I think that we would have taken care of it.
I would hope so too. And certainly those performance discussions should fix things like that. Have
Send
those
that
too.
out to the rest of the staff.
What's that?
Send that slide out to everybody.
It's in the report you got earlier.
You're welcome to share the report. Yeah. So to wrap up, I want to say kudos to the corporation for making these changes. It's always hard to make changes, especially when things are seemingly okay. But I think that moving from a 3 to a 5-point scale, that in and of itself fixed some of the problem with scoring. Scoring on a 3-point scale is really challenging. So continual improvement is the key to success. And then this is a phased approach. So we're focusing on ratings now, and it sounds like we're much more on the same page about numbers. And then we'll look at performance measure revision in October. So any final thoughts, questions, comments, concerns? Yes. Yes.
In your report, you went down to the supervisor level.
Yes, each supervisor, yeah, it's much more detailed, the report is.
Low, high.
Low, high, medium, mean, yeah.
What are our expectations as far as standardization across units, or on that percentage curve? I mean, because everyone's sort of got a, I don't know, different baseline. I'm a little confused about how this is going to work. We're going to do the evaluations first in October, and then we're going to reset the expectations.
Right. So I think the first thing that needs to happen from my opinion is have a discussion with your employees about, we're making some changes to the performance evaluation system. Please understand that this does not mean if your numbers drop that your performance has dropped. We are kind of leveling the playing field. All the supervisors have been through training. We've had discussions about what the numbers mean, and we want to make sure that it's consistent, that it's fair, and that the process has integrity. And so have those difficult conversations, and then let them know. Part of it is it's our fault because we really do need to modify our expectations, but we have to take a phased approach. So the next thing will be, so hopefully by 6 months from now or a year from now, you'll have a system that works really well. I think right now the scoring is something that you really need to pay attention to. So just remember that a 3 is achieves expectations, and be really careful with how you award those 4s and 5s.
It's interesting is I think we were on a 5
Years ago. Yeah.
And went through 3 for a
I
reason.
know. Right. Well, and you saw in the research, most organizations use a 5-point scale these days. And so I don't know why you went to a 3. Sometimes people want to try things for a while. I don't think it was working very well for you. And so it does look like the numbers, based on changing the numbers, that there's a little bit less skewed data. If you look at the mean and the median, it's not quite as skewed in favor of overrating people. Any other final thoughts, questions, concerns, comments?
Well, I would just say thank you for coming and sharing that with us, Gabrielle. I hope that everybody will take this and share this with your team. I think that's very important that everybody knows going into the evaluation process what's to be expected and that there's no curveballs. Like, I had no idea that
Right.
I'm a team player, I'm going to get a 3. Like that kind of thing. Everybody can read and understand what these goals at each number are, and that especially 3, 4, 5, they kind of build on top of each other. So I think that would be great, and I appreciate all your help implementing this. It'll be good for us.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.